Thirdly, submission multiplies the blessings of our marriage. Remember Genesis 2:24 we saw a few weeks back, talking about two becoming one. This merging is a public declaration that all the gifts and talents and strengths and goals and dreams and hopes and desires of two lives are poured into one vessel. The result is multiplication. Each positive facet of each of the partners is poured together, and that multiplies. Submission multiplies the blessings of our marriage. Contrawise, any weakness, any care, any concern, any deficits lacking are all poured into that larger sphere, and they're now reduced greatly. You see, when you get married, you pour all your weaknesses in, and those are shared, and so they're lessened. And all the talents are poured in, and it multiplies. Both have twice as much as possible. Submission not only multiplies the blessings of our marriage, submission draws us closer as a couple. Look at 1 Peter chapter 3 with me. We probably won't get very much further than this. Peter, in 1 Peter 3, I told you there are only two places that in the New Testament where this is most beautifully shown, Ephesians 5, 1 Peter 3. In the Old Testament, the hero is of course, Sarah with Abraham, and then that Proverbs 31 woman. But look with me at 1 Peter 3:7. As I said, in a wedding, a unity candle is often used in weddings to symbolize two becoming one. The two outside candles are lit, indicating the bride and groom were two individual lives, like the two individual candles. Then they merge their two lights into a single center light, and once it's lit, they extinguish their own. The problem is a lot of marriages, everybody's walking around carrying their own candle. It isn't one, it's two. Two goals, two directions, two lives, two plans, two whatevers. God says they're supposed to be merged because submission draws us closer as a couple. That's the precious truth of 1 Peter 3:7. That's the precious truth that unifies a couple because they're to share all of life. Or as Peter calls it in 1 Peter 3 and verse 7, it says, husbands likewise dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel. Now, I asked in junior high this morning, I says, how many of you remember Pastor Barnett speaking last year? No one raised their hand. I said, I spoke to you last year. Who remembers what I said? Nobody remembered. I said, you should have marked it in your Bible. And then you would, if I spoke on the same thing, you would have noticed it. Okay? Every time I read this verse, I always say the same thing. What do I always say? Weak and weaker. It's not strong and weak. It's weak and weaker. It's a comparative degree. Look back at what this is saying. It says, husbands, dwell with them, giving them honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel. If the wife is the weaker vessel, what is the husband? The stronger? No. This is a comparative degree. The husband is what? Weak. The wife is what? Weaker. Yeah. The weak leading the weaker. Okay? That's marriage. God's way. As to the weaker vessel, and here it is, and as being heirs together of the grace of life. Husbands and wives are called to be heirs together. When wives willingly accept submission and the husband gently gives them loving consideration, they are both in submission to Christ. Did you catch that? Don't wait for your wife to come around. The man is the leader. And if you're a Christian, if you're born again, men are to first of all have that loving consideration. When a husband gently gives his wife loving consideration, then they're both submissive to Christ. They're both following his example. They both enjoy God's best in his plan for their marriage. And anything less than that, shared in mutual submission. Do you remember Ephesians 5:22 is preceded by Ephesians 5:21? 5:21 says, all of you be submissive to one another. That precedes 22. Wives, be subject to your own husbands. Mutuality. Anything less than shared and mutual submission leads to a marriage that misses out on God's best. It produces a spiritual life robbed of blessings and growth. The grace of life, in verse 7 of 1 Peter 3, may refer to the opportunity to have children. They are certainly a gift from God. We already know that from Psalm 127, verse 3. The children are from the Lord. But grace of life, though it may refer to having children, it does not exclude couples who have no children. They're still promised spiritual riches if they obey God's plan for their marriage.